Hello and welcome back to the Classically Chloe Show, where we talk about music and its effects on every aspect of our daily lives. I'm your host, Chloe Castillo, and I have another fantastic guest for you today: columnist, broadcaster, author, musician, and policy analyst, Carrie Sheffield. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Chloe. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So, I want to just dive right into your story. Tell my audience a little bit about you and your background, and I guess really how music has affected just your life in general.
Yeah, I love what you're doing with this program, and I love the intersection of culture and music and ideas. And so I'm really glad to be here. As you mentioned, I'm an author, and if people want to get the full story, I have a book that came out. It's called Motorhome Prophecies: A Journey of Healing and Forgiveness. And it gives the 90,000 word story. And uh, it's called Motorhome Prophecies because I grew up in a motorhome and sheds and tents and houses as well, and homeless as a child with seven biological siblings, so 10 people living in some instances in a third world existence. Sometimes we didn't have food. We ate grass from the city park in a broth instead of having food. And so it was just a very unstable existence. But the reason why we did this is because my father was mentally ill. And he also, before getting married and going off the deep end, he had been a classical music professor. And so he was incredibly gifted. And so the book is about how he made myself and my seven siblings and our mom, so all 10 of us, we would play classical music on street corners and try to convert people to his version of a very toxic interpretation of Mormon theology. And he eventually was excommunicated from the official LDS Church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, formerly known as Mormon Church, because he was so extreme. And so he basically became a homespun prophet. But he was so gifted, and I can tell you more about his credentialing from a classical music standpoint. But for a long time, I hated, or I had a subconscious kind of anger toward music and the instruments that he assigned me, which included violin and oboe and piano, and we all sang. And so the book is about my journey to forgive him. And just even more recently, since the book's come out, to return to music and return to the joy and the beauty and the healing that comes from music.
Amazing story. I've just gotta say, it's just amazing to hear, and I was researching you a little bit, before the show when you reached out to me, I was like, "Wow, what an amazing person," and so I, of course, had to learn more about you, and just hearing your story and I guess seeing the ability, first of all, to forgive is amazing, and then secondly, beyond that, to find something beautiful out of, such a, I guess, a really, really difficult existence as a child, and music being one of those things that was, such a source of beauty, I guess, was just so interesting to me. And so, if you expand a little bit on it, if you will, now, I know you're a Christian, and so I guess music, it just is. It has a potential for such beauty to add so much beauty and goodness into the world. I think now a lot of times we overlook that, if you will, and music has become, at least the mainstream entertainment industry for what it is now, has become just such a propaganda filled woke machine, and I think we've lost a true essence to what music actually could be, whether it's classical, jazz, pop, whatever the genre may be. I think that we've kind of overlooked what it really, the power it holds in our society and our culture. So expand on this a little bit, if you will, for my audience. When it comes to beauty in our culture, how do you think music overall can really shape a nation?
Yeah, so they say that beauty will save the world, which sounds very squishy, but I think in a way it can, because as you mentioned, I am a Christian, and God created beauty, and we're created in God's image, and God created such a beautiful world for us. The nature, the flowers, the birds, just there's so much beauty in the natural world, and then He created humans and gave us the cognitive ability to create music. And I don't think anybody who can listen to a Beethoven symphony would say there's not some divine inspiration here. And so to be made in God's image means that we can create just like He creates beauty. And so when we meditate on beauty, and this is part of why churches and cathedrals are so beautiful, because they evoke this image of God and a creator who's created a beautiful world, and we can do that on our own smaller scale as little humans. And so I think what's what's really interesting over the years when you look at regimes that are despotic and controlling, the CCP or the Soviet Empire, they control the arts and they seize the arts because that is really how culture. There's a famous saying that I think it was a Scottish poet or law. I think he was both a poet and an artist, and he might have run for office. I forget exactly, and I need to look up his name. But at any rate, he said, "I don't care who writes the laws of a country. Let me write its music." Because that's really where revolutions can begin. And so that's why one of the first places people who are autocratics and controlling and suppressing people, they go to the arts because that's how they suppress and control. And so what I think is really interesting in America is that the command and control and the suppression and the DEI and the groupthink and the canceling, it's sort of like, they would say in the 1950s there was a purge against communism with McCarthyism, and he went too far and he was hunting people and blacklisting people. Well, the pendulum has swung so far in the other direction where you have wokeism and leftism from Hollywood purging people and blacklisting people. And to be a conservative in Hollywood was a death sentence. And so it's interesting. I was thinking about how there's a group I can talk about it now publicly because it's now defunct and there have been stories about it. But there was a group called Friends of Abe. I don't know if you were involved with it, Chloe, but Friends of Abe was an underground group in Hollywood and New York, and I lived in New York for almost 10 years and was involved with it. But basically, it was a group for underground conservatives to meet in arts and entertainment and media. And to me, it was a shame that people felt like they were so. I mean, all of us that it was something that we had to hide. And I guess it's easier for me because I am a political activist, so I am outspoken. So I'm not a traditional, you know, I don't act in films and things like that. I do have a very open conservative persona, and so I have a luxury that way. But a lot of creative people don't have that luxury, and the fact that now the reason they disbanded that group is because Trump won, and I think Trump has really hit this watershed moment that you touched on, Chloe, which is Trump is so fascinating to me because he was a cultural figure. And that's to the quote that I said earlier about I don't care who writes the laws, let me write the music. Trump, in so many ways, he was writing the music or he was writing culture. He was friends with all of these Hollywood filmmakers, musicians. Steven Spielberg had a condo in Trump Tower, and Steven Spielberg is, one of the top cultural creators. And Trump was friends with these famous singers and musicians. They all loved him, and he was this beloved TV star in the arts. And so that's how he became beloved. And so that's why he had such star power to then move over into politics in the same way that Ronald Reagan did. And so that's where I think conservatives, we really have this amazing moment where there's a watershed for us to step in to the culture and the arts arena and to take the country back to a place where people can think freely and they don't have to be suppressed.
Absolutely. And I think that we're coming up on a full year of Trump in the White House, right? Or, just a few days here actually, which is amazing. And I could not be more thankful, believe me. And so I guess I was going to ask you what's the biggest shift you've seen culturally, but I think you've kind of answered that a little bit too, though. I think there is a really large cultural shift. People on the right and just people in general, because you spoke about basically the underground for musicians in Hollywood. And I think that's something that I've seen, personally myself as a group of I guess, unvaxxed or at least against the COVID vax musicians or symphony orchestra musicians who all spoke out or just refused to take the vaccine during that insanity. And they were all basically either fired, and these are like tenured, people from their orchestras. And these are major orchestras across the US. These are not like little, college things. It's like, massive orchestras, and these players were all blacklisted from their careers and from that space. And so it's so interesting to see, though. I've heard so many stories like this where you hear about how these people are just completely, like you said, it's a death sentence for their career when it comes to that. And I think the conservatives have such an opportunity now to really show strength when it comes to in the entertainment world. I think right now we've kind of been very focused on policy and on politics, which is fantastic, and that has to happen as well, clearly. But I think that when it comes to art and when it comes to culture and entertainment and music in particular, we have a really big opportunity to really make a massive shift in our culture towards the right. When I say the right, I mean, values of conservatism. I mean, respect for your elders, just I guess aspiring to something greater than yourself. We see so much music now, it's just very self-centered. There's no music used to direct to God. Bach would write Soli Deo Gloria on the end of his transcripts, just so much that I think we have the potential to really cultivate in America now that we have President Trump in office in a conservative minded, I guess, DC. So back to my question, what is the biggest shift you've seen culturally since President Trump has taken office?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall sense that we can come out from under the shadows, like we can speak more freely. Like when I think the day of his inauguration or like the day after, something I posted on social media, I said, I graduated college in 2005, and I have lived since then almost the entire those 20 years in very liberal areas. I went to Harvard for a master's. I lived in New York for almost 10 years, and I've lived in DC for the rest of that time with a little stint in Utah. Um, and so, aside from that little stint in Utah, I was in very blue dominated areas by progressive thinking. And for the first time in those 20 years last year, I felt just this weight off of me where it's like, I can say what I want to say, and not, I'm not living in fear, just from like even just a deep subconscious level, which uh, folks who've been through a similar journey might understand. So that's like the big kind of like crock pot that I've been simmering in. And I think culturally, that crock pot, the what we're simmering in is it's a different recipe right now, thanks to Trump. I will say also in the ensuing year, I think a big moment was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. From a cultural standpoint, from a musical standpoint, what was so fascinating to me was to see all these Christian musicians performing and just pouring their hearts out to God, and to see so many, especially young men, go to church for the first time and to see them touched by this music, to me was amazing. And that's uh, for me in my journey, like I said, to come back to music, it really started in the church for me. So when I moved down to DC, it's 6 years. I can't believe it. It'll be 6 years on January 26th this year. I started performing with some local churches, singing, playing violin. I also play piano, not as well as you, Chloe. I'm more a violinist and a vocalist, but uh, to go back to music through the Christian angle was very healing for me, because it gave a deeper sense of purpose. And like you said, it's not me focused. It's really, and it's not just focused on like chasing the cute boy or the cute girl. It's really focused on something that is lasting and eternal. And I think that is what separates a culture of life. And when I say life, I mean something that is lasting and thriving and abundant, as opposed to things like the CCP and the Soviet Empire. They didn't want culture that celebrated God. They were atheist. So people who believed in God, whether it was Christian or Buddhist or any religion that would put God ahead of the government in these empires where they slaughtered 100 million people, it was suppressed. And so to have arts and culture, after Charlie Kirk's death, such a big stage. Like I think it was one of the biggest funerals since Martin Luther King Jr. Like that is a huge watershed moment in our culture. And to have it be so infused with Christian music, to me really touched my heart, because I was like, wow, this is where like music will, there's a phrase that says he who sings prays twice. Um, and it really helped me to just feel a little bit more emboldened in my music, to see the response to Charlie Kirk. And I knew Charlie some. We'd done Fox programs together. We'd done, I once spoke to him at the White House about my faith journey, leaving the LDS community, and joining, as a Protestant now. But he had a lot of LDS people working for him, and after his death, the place where he was killed is a very dominant LDS university. And they were able to have an event in November where they brought together Protestant evangelicals and LDS together. And the pastor who led it asked me to help him write his speech. And they had some amazing Christian musicians, including Chris Tomlin, perform. And so it was this beautiful just coming together of groups that had been at war, because evangelicals and LDS, since the LDS founding in 1830, so we're talking almost 200 years, have been at each other's throats and had major disagreements. And so it took Charlie Kirk's murder at the site for both these sides to come together, and music was a big part of it.
Yeah, music is very uniting, I think, and it's also divisive depending on who gets their hands on it. And I think that when the right people, like you say, really utilize music to do something beautiful, it is amazing, and that was a horrific time in our nation. And I think seeing people come together and uniting through music is one of those ways was really beautiful. So let me get your thoughts on a couple things here. Before we go to an ad break, I just want to ask you about the Kennedy Center again. So I know you've been there recently at the Trump Kennedy Center, as you reminded me before we got on air here, which is I think is awesome. It's fantastic. I love it. But a question for you. So I've seen a lot of people canceling. It's kind of like a big deal right now. Everyone's canceling on the Kennedy Center due to the name change. There's a lot of leftist artists who just, can't stomach it. So what are your thoughts on that? Just seeing that unfold.
Yeah, it's interesting because I live right over the river in Arlington. So I drive by the Trump Kennedy Center quite often. And just a couple of days ago, the road was blocked because there were a bunch of protesters right in front of the Trump Kennedy Center. And I wasn't sure. I asked my Lyft driver, like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, they're probably protesting the name change was the only thing I could think of, because there's nothing else over there. It's just the Trump Kennedy Center. And so I never verified that's what they were there for, but it was interesting because I've never had that. I mean, I see protesters in DC all the time, but never there. And so that's where my mind went, like, wow, there's so much hatred for Trump making this a bipartisan institution. And what's interesting is that it's the whole genesis of the Trump Kennedy Center was bipartisan. It was created under Eisenhower, the idea, as I understand it, of having a cultural institution that would be bipartisan. And so then later it was named the Kennedy Center. And it's like, this should be bipartisan. And Gerald Ford, Republican, supported it. So to have a Trump Kennedy bipartisan celebration of the arts, to me, it just makes so much sense. And I was just there, like you said, at the honors. I guess they'll call them the Trump Kennedy honors now, but that was on December 7th. And I was able to interview and do some articles and talk on different networks about the event. And I spoke to a couple members of the band Kiss. That was one of the honorees. Spoke to Gloria Gaynor, who was one of the honorees. And then also Michael Crawford, who was the original Phantom, spoke with him. And they all said the same thing, which is, this is about the arts. It should not be about attacking a certain president from a certain party. And so it was a really beautiful night. And I felt invigorated, and it was really beautiful to me because like I said, I've lived in DC through Republican and Democratic administrations. So it was the first time where I really felt like I actually belong here. And it was a great feeling.
I love it. That's so awesome. So I want to get your thoughts on what we can do to really, and I know it's a bipartisan institution, but I think that while we have conservative leadership, at least we can really start to bring up some of those kind of values back into the arts, and utilize the Kennedy Center for that. We're seeing the left, the thing is, you give them an inch, they take a mile. And so I think that if we kind of use that same analogy, if you will, and actually start to push for some values back that really align with what makes America great, I think we'll see a really big shift in our culture long term. So I want to get your thoughts on that when we come back for a quick ad break.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
If I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe,
but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep and feeling with more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
Carrie, thank you for being on here with us. I truly appreciate you joining to talk about all of this. It's been awesome so far. So I want to get your thoughts, like I said a minute ago, about the golden age of arts and culture in America. Now that President Trump is in office, and now that he has indeed purged the Kennedy Center of the wokeness that the woke virus had taken it over. What kind of opportunity does I guess this administration present when it comes to getting conservative values a little bit more uplifted in this counterculture that we are, I guess, building as Americans?
You know what's really interesting is that I really feel like the Kennedy Center had become an extremist place. Like, to me, it's not so much that Trump was he's not bringing in extremist right-wing values. He's actually just moving that window back to where middle America is, because it had been drugged so far left because of these bubbles, these so-called elite bubbles that the cultural quote unquote elites were floating in. And they were so out of touch with middle America that, just the extreme racism, the extreme idea that men should be in women's prisons and in women's sports, like these are not okay. I mean, these are like Scott Jennings on CNN likes to say, these are 80-20 issues that 80% of Americans disagree with the extremism of the left. And so Trump really moved the center of gravity back to what is healthy and just normal, freed expression of the human experience. And so in that way, I don't think it should be political. And that's what I loved about the Trump Kennedy Center honorees, when they said, this is about the music and the arts, but it's about music and arts that really the vast majority of Americans can get together and rally around. And so, but to answer more about your question specifically, though, I think what's really a great moment for the arts is that when you look at the arts and sort of the canon of not only music, but also literature, whether it's classical, even Shakespeare, people want, the hard left wants to cancel Shakespeare. There's a great movie. If your listeners and viewers don't know, I recommend it. It's called Tar, T-A-R. I first heard about it. It came out in 2022. It's about a white female musical conductor in Europe, and they try to cancel her. At one point, there's a scene. One of her students who is non-white tries to cancel all the dead old white men musicians who create the canon of Western music, like you mentioned Bach and I mentioned Beethoven. Those are old dead white men, and the left wanted to cancel them because they said it's not diverse enough and it's exploitative. Like, this is all nonsense. I mean, these are the architects of the musical systems that created the Western and which has been exported to the whole world, our musical systems, and they should be celebrated. And so I think that's what this year, what I'm really excited about is America 250. And I know that the Trump Kennedy Center, I've talked to friends over there, they're planning to use the Trump Kennedy Center as a launching pad to celebrate the arts and the connection of the traditional values that built America and built the West that was then exported to the rest of the world.
I absolutely love that. I think that's so fitting. And, it is amazing to see how the arts can be used. Again, it's art. It's not necessarily going to be partisan. I think for the most part, it shouldn't be partisan. And like you said, we've seen the left completely hijack just good music, good television as we know it, and implement a value system that rots America at its core. And seeing this administration get rid of that, and then hopefully start really implementing the artists that are going to, I guess, revive America's culture with something beautiful and good, is very exciting to see on the horizon. So I'm excited about that. One more question before we stop here. I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts on, and we've talked about this a little bit, what are your thoughts on the role music plays in influencing the hearts and minds of the youth?
Oh, it's enormous. And when you look at, again, sort of what's really interesting to me right now when you're talking about young people is there's a huge divide. It's an even more enormous gender divide than in generations past, where young men are becoming way more conservative and religious than young women, and the divide is becoming starker than in generations past right now among Gen Z. And when you look at the cultural kind of figures who are coming up, and you look at the supposed, you know, celebrities who young women are supposed to look up to, they're all spouting, leftist ideas. You look at Taylor Swift. It's been sad to see her hard left shift because she's kowtowed to Hollywood. I mean, she started out in the Nashville kind of traditional country music, old time values, and then she just became so uh, captive to the people who wrote her paychecks, that she came out and bashed the senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, just very pro-abortion, and in many ways disavowed where she came from. And I have a heart, and I apologize to any Swifties out there, but it's just been sad to see, I think, how she's been used in that way. And she's come out against Trump multiple times. And so I see her as sort of like a template for a lot of young women and what's happening. And so I think there's a big opportunity for young female artists like you, Chloe, to really provide a different model and a different template for America's young women, to say, I mean, and we're seeing it some a little bit with just kind of the overall trad influencer wives. You don't have to you don't have to fit in that model either. Like, and that's what I want to tell young women. You don't have to be a trad influencer wife to embrace conservative values. You can find a way to do it in your own unique imprint. And so I think there's a deep need for that, from a musical standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, to reach America's young women. And so that's part of why I do what I do, which is I'm with Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Voice. We're the country's largest conservative women's group, and we'd love to work with you, Chloe. And we one of our at our galas, we have a singer that sung at the last couple of galas, and she's an up and coming country singer, and she happens to be the girlfriend of Kash Patel, and she's this beautiful budding young artist in her 20s, and we love to showcase her. And so I think we need to have 1,000, a million artists like her, who are really shining and letting young women know there's a different way.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because that's something I've seen. We have, I guess, a lack of good role models when it comes to culture, especially in music culture for young women. And we are seeing young women are increasingly liberal, unfortunately. And so I think that one way we can really grasp their attention is through entertainment, and music is a huge part of that. And so having some role models out there that really hold those values true is incredibly important. I completely agree with you. So we're out of time here, but please tell my audience where they can find you, Carrie.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to connect with them. I have a Substack where I've got a monthly free newsletter. And then if they want to be a subscriber, they'll get more content during the month. Again, I've got the book if they want to check out the full story. It's called Motorhome Prophecies, A Journey of Healing and Forgiveness. And I will tease this year. So I wrote this book. It's 90,000 words. Late last year, I co-wrote a song with some Christian friends in Nashville, and I call it, and my 90,000 word book and a 200 word song. And it's called My Heavenly Father Is, and we're going to be releasing the master recording of that this year. So we did the demo last year. So stay tuned for that.
Wonderful, Carrie. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing a little bit about your story, your thoughts on all this. I truly appreciate you, and let's definitely do something in the future soon. Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you. And keep doing what you're doing, Chloe. God bless you.
God bless. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please subscribe to the Classically Chloe Show on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify. Please also follow me at Classically Chloe on Instagram and all other platforms. Also, check out my organization, Make Music Right, at makemusicright.com, and Make Music Right on all socials. See you next week. God bless.